All right, welcome to another video from Top Comics Pressing. In this video, what I'm going to do is just talk about some of the materials that I use and some of the supplies that I've gotten the most mileage out of. I know that there are a lot of similar videos out there with really detailed shopping lists and all kinds of recommendations. What you see out here is most of the stuff that I use in terms of dry cleaning. I don't use a ton else. But probably the couple of most important pieces of equipment to buy are the really nice backer boards. So I buy these in bulk from eGerber, directly from their webpage, and I think I get them at about 1,000 at a time. They're not cheap by any means, but I recommend the full back boards as well as the 2-inch or the Mylite 2s, the 2mm Mylars. The reason for that is after I press a book, I really want it to present as good as possible, and so I make sure I send books I press home in something that really shines, and the Mylar is just, a really great way to store a book. It just has an aesthetic to it. But beyond that, the full back boards, while they're significantly more expensive than normal backer boards or half back boards, these things do have, the really nice thickness. And there really is nothing more tragic than having a book get pressed and then worrying about if it's going to make it to the owner or to CGC and into the slab and the condition it comes out of the press. And so, at least in my opinion, if you're paying somebody $15 to $25 or more to work on a book, and if you're paying CGC $25 to press or degrade that book and put it in encapsulation, you want to get your most out of that investment. And so to me, spending the $1 or $1.50 or so on making sure it gets there is well worth the money. And so I put everything after I work on it into a 2mm Mylar and a full backer board. And so those are probably the most important thing out here. Other than that, Scotch tape is my worst enemy. As soon as I get books from people, the first thing I do is remove all of the Scotch tape. I don't want any risk whatsoever of having this stick, even if it's only a 0.1% chance, to a comic and removing ink or color. And so this is from all of the comics I've gotten this week, and it's a disgusting bundle of Scotch tape that I'm going to throw away, but I've been saving it up for this video. What I recommend instead is painter's tape. You can use Frogger tape. I like packing in 2-inch Frogger tape. So this is true Frogger tape, and I'll use this to bundle comics when I pack. But on the back of a bag and a board, I'm going to use this stuff. And the reason I use this stuff is if I take my comic and I accidentally stick some to it, I'm going to be able to very carefully peel that off. And so even if I only do that 1 out of 1,000 books I handle, I do not want ink or color or anything to come off, even if I flag it only 1 in a million. Now, I don't bring out the tape until after the comic is in the bag and the board. So that's the other trick. Get the comic in the bag and the board first, then tape it. And I'll videotape that later. But definitely, I highly suggest painter's tape. All right, let's get that comic book out of here. Now, when it comes to actually doing dry cleaning, I would say this is my #1 utensil, this retractable click eraser. I use this brand. I like it better than the rubber eraser tops. This stuff I find does not leave residue, so I don't find that I have to polish comic covers after I work on them. It says right there, won't tear paper. If anything, after I go over an area with this, I think it actually polishes the gloss a little bit too. It tends to look a little bit shinier than it does with other erasers I've looked at. And I love how convenient these are. If you bust it or rip it, you just stick a little bit more out. If you really get going and you tear through a lot of eraser, you just kind of extend it. And so these, hands down, are probably what I get 95% of my dry cleaning out of. Highly recommend them. Now, there are little nooks and crannies that you can get at, and you can see the difference in the tip size here. This one is quite broad. This is much, much smaller. So I love this for really fine areas or when I really want to make sure I don't get there. This is the product Mono Zero by Tombow. They come with eraser caps, and you can pull these out too. So, I mean, it's kind of the same general philosophy. The downside of these, I will say, is that they do tend to leave residue. So if I go over a spot with this, there's tends to be streaking there. And so I then gently take this and just gently rub the residue off using the bigger eraser. And I'll have some video examples of that. So these are really useful. I only use this on occasion though when I'm in a really, really tight spot. The other cleaning piece that I have up here are these Mr. Clean thin eraser sheets. And so you can see that these are quite small. What I do is I rip them into squares, and the squares, you know, start about that size, and depending on how big of an area I'm looking for, I'll even trim this down. So I typically will tear them to be about half that. So, you know, what is that? Maybe a quarter sheet-ish. And what I tend to do is just put my 3 fingers on it and just rub the comic very slightly, almost like a Ouija board. So no downward pressure, just enough pressure to slide side by side. And these do a really good job of pulling off dirt. You know, and other people prefer these Absorbing sponges. I have this, I've used them. I like to cut these into sizes where, you know, they were grippable and I could gently pull, and that was okay. These, you know, I haven't really fell in love with, so that's more of a personal preference. You can see I have used it though. It's quite dirty on that end, and it's quite worn out. So I'll use these on occasion, but I think for as expensive as these sponges are, you get a better bang for your buck and a little bit more use out of these thin eraser sheets. You'll notice this is not the big cube. It is a very small thin sheet, and again I just gently glide it over the surface of a comic book. Okay, so you might ask what these other 2 things are for. Well, the Swiffer sheets are just as valuable as the eraser, because that eraser is going to leave eraser shavings all over your workspace. And if you get any of those eraser shavings, and sometimes you can end up with a pile of eraser shavings, and those eraser shavings, even the smallest one, is going to end up pressed into a comic cover. And so you need to get that comic cover completely clean of any eraser shavings or bits before it goes anywhere near my press. So I actually do all my cleaning out on this desk, and I don't bring any of my erasers or any of my cleaning supplies into the room with my presses. So they are physically separated to make sure I don't have carryover. And I use these Swiffer sheets as kind of a disposable cloth to wipe up the area, as well as to wipe the top of a comic when I'm done with it. And so I'll have examples of that. But these are relatively inexpensive. You can get them at pretty much any store, and they do a great job at picking up eraser tidbits. And so we'll see me use that on occasion. The last one here is a very valuable cleaning tool, and that is simply a cotton round. If you have sticky residue of any kind, or if you've got goobies on your cover, this is going to be my very first go-to, is just to rub that area and buff it with a cotton round, and you would probably be surprised the amount of residue and goobies that I've been able to pull off of a comic with nothing more than a little round of cotton. Now, there's one thing that I neglected to bring on up here, and that is it just made me think of it with goobies. I very rarely use one of these metal spatulas. You can get these in a number of varieties. It doesn't really matter. The point is you just need something that is polished smooth and that you can use to chip or very gently scrape. So on the surface of a comic, if you do have a large piece of stuck debris, I usually gently slide this towards that chunk and you can pop it off. So I guess that technically counts as dry cleaning with one of these as well. And you can get a variety of those other ones. But the cotton round, I personally think, is the most underappreciated component of a good solid dry cleaning. Also, if you have a very light surface stain, sometimes you can get just a damp cotton round and just very slightly rub an area. If you do rub too hard or with too much moisture, you will cut through ink. And that's also true for erasers on ink, as well as the Absorbing Sponge, as well as the Mr. Clean Sheets. So all this stuff does have the ability to damage both gloss and color, and so you want to be very diligent when working with it all. But that'll be for a different video. In this video, I just wanted to give you an idea of what supplies I use and what you'll be seeing in my videos when I'm doing dry cleaning. So if you see the little squares of Mr. Clean Sheet, you'll know what they are. And if you see the erasers, you'll know what that is. So as always, if you enjoyed the content of this video, please give me a like, please subscribe, please follow, please share with your friends, etc. And thank you for viewing.